Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at some pretty interesting stuff in the world of cloud security.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, you're a security expert and you've been called in to investigate huge logistics.
Oh,
They might left some sensitive information out in the open, and our job is to figure out how bad it is.
oh, interesting.
So we have this IP address, 16.171.123.169.
Right.
And it's publicly linked to Huge Logistics.
Yeah.
When you visit this IP address, you get this super basic login page.
Right.
It seems harmless enough, right?
Yeah, at first glance, definitely.
But I have a feeling that there's more to this story.
Absolutely.
So how do we start to uncover what's really going on here?
Well, a good security researcher knows to look under the hood. So if we examine the web page source code, we find a link to an S3 bucket.
Okay.
And that's where things start to get interesting.
So what exactly is an S3 bucket?
It's basically a storage container in the cloud provided by AWS. They're really popular for storing all sorts of data, but they can be a gold mine for hackers if they're not configured correctly.
So they're kind of risky.
Yeah, if you're not careful.
Okay, so Huge Logistics is using an S3 bucket for something. What's the big deal?
Well, the name of the bucket is Huge Logistics Dashboard.
Not very subtle.
Nope, not at all. And inside, we found two folders. Private and static.
Private, huh? That's just asking for trouble. What was in there?
Well, you would think so, right?
Yeah.
But at first glance, it appeared empty.
Oh, really?
But here's where it gets even more interesting. S3 buckets have this feature called versioning. It's like a safety net.
Okay.
It keeps multiple versions of every file in the bucket.
So even if someone deletes a file, there might be an older version still hanging around.
You got it. We couldn't actually see if versioning was enabled on this bucket, but we could look at the metadata, the behind-the-scenes info about the bucket, and we found a changelog for a file called auth.js inside the static folder.
Auth.js.
Wow.
Why does that sound so suspicious?
Well, auth often stands for authentication.
Right.
It might have login information, potentially even credentials just sitting there.
Ooh, that's not good.
Yeah,
Were you able to access this auth.js file?
we were. Each version of the file has a unique ID called a versionid.
Okay.
And so we had this idea, what if we put that versionid into the S3 bucket URL?
You kidding? What happened?
We were able to access an older version of auth.s.
No way.
And guess what? It had leaked credentials right there in the code.
Oh, wow. What could someone do with that?
These credentials gave us access to a financial dashboard with all sorts of sensitive information, but wait, it gets worse.
There's more.
Yeah, the profile section of this dashboard had even more AWS credentials saved as a note.
They just left the keys to the kingdom out in the open.
Twice. Unbelievable, right?
So what did you do?
We set up those second credentials, and they belong to a data user. That probably means they have high-level access.
Oh, yeah.
And remember those delete markers we found in the metadata?
Yeah, those meant that something had been deleted.
Right. And the deleted file was called Business Health Board Meeting, confidential.xlsx. Does that sound like something you want just anyone to see?
Not at all.
Yeah.
How did you get that file?
Well, we used the versionid to download the previous version.
Smart.
And inside, there it was, the flag content that completed the puzzle.
Wow. That is quite a story.
Mm-hmm.
Huge Logistics made some pretty big mistakes.
You could say that again.
So what can we learn from this? What are the key takeaways here?
Well, it really highlights how important it is to understand the tools you're using, even something like an S3 bucket. Versioning, for example, is a double-edged sword.
How so?
It can protect you, but it can also create unexpected vulnerabilities if you're not careful.
It's like they accidentally left the back door wide open.
Yeah, pretty much.
But couldn't they have just disabled versioning to prevent this whole thing?
Well, it's not that simple. Versioning is considered a best practice for a reason.
Okay.
It helps protect against accidents, like if someone deletes a file by mistake, and it can even be a lifesaver in a ransomware attack.
So how do you find the right balance between protecting your data and keeping it secure?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
There are a few key things to keep in mind. First, access control is really important.
Right.
Companies need to make sure that only the right people have access to sensitive information.
Like no more data users running around with too much power.
Exactly. And it's not just about setting it up once and forgetting about it.
Oh, okay.
You need to check and update those permissions regularly.
Got it. What else?
Encryption is also really important.
Okay.
You want to encrypt your data at rest and in transit. That way, even if someone gets past your access controls, they can't read the data.
So it's like an extra layer of protection.
Exactly.
What about those leaked credentials in the auth.js file? How can developers avoid that mistake?
The biggest thing is to never hard-code credentials directly into your code.
That seems obvious now that you say it.
Yeah, it's like leaving a key under the doormat. Instead, you should use things like environment variables or a secrets management system.
So you keep them separate and more secure.
Right.
Anything else?
Continuous monitoring and vulnerability scanning are also essential.
Okay.
Basically, you need to regularly check your systems for any weaknesses or suspicious activity.
So you can't just set it and forget it.
That's right. The sooner you find a problem, the better.
It sounds like you have to be really proactive about security.
You do. Security is not a one-time thing. It's an ongoing process.
You know, this whole deep dive has really made me think it's easy to assume that cloud security is something that only big companies need to worry about.
Yeah.
But this case shows that even small mistakes can have huge consequences.
Absolutely. Security is everyone's responsibility, whether you're a developer or a system administrator or just someone browsing the web. We all have a role to play in keeping information safe.
It's about more than just fancy algorithms and firewalls.
Right.
It's about awareness
Yeah.
and having good security practices.
Exactly. Think before you click. Be mindful of what you share online and use strong passwords, different ones for every account.
Yeah, those little things can make a big difference.
For sure. And if you're responsible for cloud infrastructure, well, you really need to be on top of things. Access control, encryption, regular monitoring, it all adds up.
It sounds like there's a lot to think about.
There is, but the cloud is an amazing tool. It offers so many opportunities, but it also comes with new security challenges.
Right.
We all need to stay informed and proactive.
Well, I know I'm going to be double-checking my own online security after this.
Good.
It's made me realize just how much we take for granted in our digital lives.
I think that's the biggest takeaway from all of this. The more we understand about the threats, the better we can protect ourselves and our information.
Well said. We've covered so much ground today. Thanks for walking us through this investigation and sharing your expertise.
Happy to be here.
It's been really eye-opening to see how these things can play out in the real world.
Definitely. And for our listeners out there, stay curious, stay vigilant, and stay safe out there in the digital world.
Great advice. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.